Grace never planned to become a mother, but life changed the day her younger sister Lily dragged her sick son into her tiny Seattle apartment and left him there as if he were luggage. That night was cold, gray, and soaked with rain that felt heavy enough to press on her chest. She had just warmed leftover soup when the buzzer rang again. Without looking up, she sighed. It's her. Moments later, the door burst open and Lily appeared with a messy suitcase and 10-year-old Evan slumped on top. I'm meeting someone, Lily said quickly. It's just for tonight. Grace stepped in front of the door, refusing to let Lily slip away yet again. You said that on Monday and Sunday and last Thursday, she warned. Lily rolled her eyes and waved her off. He has his meds in the suitcase. You know what to do. Evan shuffled quietly to the couch, wheezing softly, his pale lips trembling. The sound pierced Grace in a way she couldn't explain. Lily, no. You can't keep doing this. He's sick, she insisted. Lily scoffed. I need a break. You wouldn't understand. Grace snapped. A break between Cancun and Miami? Lily only smirked. The argument ended when Lily threw out a final jab, you like playing mommy, and slammed the door behind her. Silence filled the room, broken only by the faint whir of the nebulizer and Evan's fragile breathing. Grace knelt beside him and whispered, You okay, sweetheart? He nodded weakly. She sat on the floor beside the couch, watching the machine timer count down. Something felt final about tonight. Heavy. Wrong. No child should watch their mother walk away without looking back, and no woman should be left holding the pieces alone. But Grace stayed beside him until the machine stopped beeping. The next evening, Grace placed 2 plates of grilled cheese and warm tomato soup on the small kitchen table. Evan picked at the crusts like he wasn't sure he was allowed to eat the rest. He looked pale, exhausted, and far older than 10. Grace watched him closely, noticing how still he sat, how quietly he breathed, how invisible he seemed to believe he was. You don't have to finish, she said softly. Just try. After a long silence, she finally asked, Do you miss her? Evan shrugged without lifting his head. She doesn't talk to me unless she's mad. Grace reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his trembling fingers. None of this is your fault, she whispered. Evan didn't look up. His shoulders tightened as if he didn't know how to receive comfort. Grace warmed his soup again, pretending not to notice how he blinked back tears. As the microwave hummed, she gripped the counter and whispered to herself, He's mine now. I don't care what it takes. When she returned the bowl to him, he murmured, I thought you didn't want me to waste it. She smiled. I said try, not give up. Later that night, the apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the slow rhythm of Evan's breathing as he slept on the pull-out couch. Grace stood in the kitchen staring at her phone, hoping this time Lily might answer. She pressed call. Laughter spilled through the speaker, followed by music and distant waves. Lily, where are you? Grace demanded. Oh, you called, Lily said, giggling. I'm in Tulum, babe. It's gorgeous. Grace froze. You left the country while your son is sick. Lily sighed. Relax. He's with you. You're basically his second mom anyway. Those words, you are now, hit Grace so hard her knees almost buckled. The call ended with a click, leaving her alone in the dim kitchen. She slid to the floor, the cold tiles pressing against her legs as she finally let herself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just the quiet, aching tears of someone who had held too much for too long. She wept for Evan, for herself, for the sister she could no longer recognize, for the family she once believed they could be. When the tears finally slowed, she whispered to the darkness, I won't fail him. Not now. Morning arrived gently, sunlight slipping through the blinds as Grace rubbed the sleep from her eyes. Evan stretched on the couch, his curls messy, his face softer than the night before. How are you feeling? She asked. Better, he whispered. Can I have toast? She smiled. Toast I can do. He followed her into the kitchen, climbing onto a bar stool and watching her with quiet curiosity. You look tired, he said. Grace raised an eyebrow. You look like a wild porcupine. He grinned. Are you cooking? Are we safe? He laughed. A real laugh. Only if you call 911 fast. While she cooked eggs, Evan watched her like she was performing a magic trick. You think you'll burn the kitchen again? He teased. That was one time, she said, pointing the spatula at him. He leaned forward. That smoke alarm had feelings. They both laughed and Grace felt something loosen inside her chest. That's the first time you've laughed in forever, Evan said gently. She hesitated. It's been a heavy couple of days. He tilted his head. Because of my mom? She avoided hurting him and said softly, because being a grown-up is hard sometimes. But you've been incredible. Evan pushed his plate aside and whispered, I like it here. It's quiet. Not like Mom's place. Grace froze for a moment then nodded. You can stay as long as you want. His eyes widened. Really? Really, she said, meaning every word. He returned to his breakfast, humming softly. Grace watched him, noticing how he flinched at sudden sounds, how he apologized for small things, how desperately he wanted to belong. She whispered to herself, maybe I can do this. When he held up his drawing of her holding burnt toast, she laughed again. Okay, chef, round 2 later. Over the next weeks, Grace learned what real exhaustion felt like. She woke before sunrise to work her freelance tech jobs, packed Evan's lunches, checked his inhaler twice, and walked him to school even when he insisted he was not a baby. She replied, let me pretend you still need me. After school, she hurried to her shift at the bookstore, returning home just in time to help him with homework. Money stayed tight but love stretched wider than fear. One night, while he worked on a math worksheet, she realized he was solving problems far beyond his grade level. Wait, how did you do that? Grace asked, pointing at the page. Evan shrugged. I saw a video about prime factors and I remembered what you said about patterns. She stared at him. You're kind of a genius. He blushed. Only because you help me. She shook her head. No, seriously. You're the kind of smart that gets kids bumped up a grade. Evan frowned. Wouldn't that be weird? Everyone would stare. Grace leaned closer. They'd stare and say, that kid is amazing. Evan whispered, Mom said I was too much. Grace touched his hand gently. She was wrong. Evan looked up at her then, eyes glassy but hopeful. Do you think I'm too much? He asked. Grace leaned forward with quiet certainty. I think you're exactly who you're meant to be and I'm lucky to watch you grow. He nodded and returned to his work, humming softly again. When he finished, he pushed the paper toward her. You should make a trophy, he said. For best tutor. Grace laughed. I'd win first place. Evan shook his head. Second. First goes to pizza. She burst into laughter, the sound filling the warm apartment like sunlight finally breaking through. Saturday mornings slowly became Grace's favorite part of their new life. No school rush, no work emails, just quiet moments where the world felt gentle. One morning she woke to a strange smell. Vanilla, syrup, and something slightly burnt. She panicked and hurried to the kitchen. There stood Evan in an oversized apron, flour on his shirt, and a mountain of uneven pancakes stacked beside him. Surprise, he shouted proudly. She blinked. You made all this? He nodded eagerly. I googled how not to burn the pan. Grace laughed as one pancake smoked behind him. And how did that go? Evan shrugged. We got pancakes and a fire drill, he said with a grin. Grace rushed to turn off the burner, shaking her head in disbelief and love. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. Evan looked suddenly shy. I wanted to. She knelt, studying his messy curls and syrup-stained sleeves. You made my whole year, she said. He threw his arms around her and she held him tightly. Later, when she tasted a pancake, she chewed slowly. It's unique. Evan smirked. Scale of 1 to 10? She said, a solid 4.7. He gasped. Out of 5. They ate slowly that morning, laughing between bites as syrup dripped onto the table. Evan talked about his upcoming science project and a squirrel he saw slip on ice, insisting it deserved an award for dramatic performance. Grace listened, feeling something settle inside her, a peace she hadn't felt in years. After breakfast, Evan gathered the plates. You cook, I clean, he said. Even if you cooked weird pancakes. She flicked his ear gently. Watch it, kid. Later, when he went outside to toss snowballs at tree trunks, she watched from the window and whispered, maybe we really can do this. A week later, Grace took Evan to the clinic for his regular appointment. The waiting room was unusually quiet and Grace's nerves grew with every passing minute. Evan sat calmly beside her with a dog-eared book, swinging his legs. You nervous? He asked without looking up. She tried to act casual. Of course not. He gave her a knowing smile. Your leg is doing the bounce thing and your lips are doing the tight line thing. Grace stared at him. Have you been studying me? Evan grinned. You're not that mysterious. Before she could respond, the doctor finally called them in. Dr. Mora greeted them warmly and began the examination, listening carefully to Evan's lungs and checking his oxygen levels. Grace sat rigid in the corner, holding her breath every time the monitor beeped. After several tense minutes, the doctor straightened and smiled. I'm impressed, she said. Grace blinked. Really? Dr. Mora nodded. His inflammation is down. His numbers are up. He's responding beautifully to the routine you've kept. Grace exhaled shakily, realizing she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Evan squeezed her hand. Told you, he whispered. She brushed a tear away quickly. Yeah, you did. As they walked home, Evan skipped ahead, crunching dry leaves with every step. Grace watched him with a heart full of relief. We're going to be okay, she whispered to herself. Evan spun around and walked backward, smiling. You look happy. She nodded. I am. When they reached the apartment, he dropped his backpack and flopped onto the couch. Can we get pizza tonight? He asked. Maybe, she replied. If you finish all your homework. He groaned dramatically. Child labor. She laughed. It's called education. He smirked. Pretty sure it's labor. Grace shook her head, smiling all the way to the kitchen. Months passed and Evan grew stronger, physically, emotionally, and academically. Grace adjusted to their rhythm. Early work hours, school drop-offs, part-time shifts, late-night coding projects, and evenings filled with homework and simple dinners. It was never easy, but it was theirs. One afternoon she watched him solving equations 2 grade levels ahead. His pencil tapped lightly as he murmured formulas under his breath. You know, she said softly, you could do amazing things one day. Evan looked up, surprised. Really? Grace smiled. Really? His voice dropped to a whisper. Because of you. She swallowed hard. Because of us. Grace didn't respond right away. She simply walked over and brushed a curl from Evan's forehead. You're doing the work, she said softly. I'm just cheering for you. Evan shrugged, his cheeks pink. Still feels different here, he whispered. Safe. Those words settled deep inside her chest. Later that night, while he read his fantasy book on the couch, Grace washed the dishes and watched him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't flinching at sounds anymore. He wasn't apologizing for every cough. He was just being a kid. A kid finally allowed to exist without fear. One late evening after homework and cocoa, Evan sat cross-legged on the carpet, sketching in his notebook. Grace noticed the drawing, her standing in the kitchen holding a fire extinguisher while charred toast smoked beside her. That's rude, she said playfully. Evan grinned. Art imitates life. She tossed a pillow at him. I can cook. He raised an eyebrow. Debatable. She tried to keep a straight face. You know, I can ground you. He laughed so hard he fell sideways. Watching him laugh freely without holding back filled Grace with a warmth she couldn't describe. This life, messy as it was, felt real. Life found a rhythm. Mornings full of routines, afternoons filled with work, evenings dedicated to quiet moments that stitched them together. One morning while walking him to school, Evan said, You don't have to walk me every day, you know. Grace smiled. I know. But I like seeing you get through the doors. He kicked a pebble down the sidewalk. Most kids get embarrassed when adults walk them. She nudged his shoulder. Good thing you're not most kids. He grinned. True. At the school gates he looked back and waved before running inside. Grace savored the moment, feeling oddly proud. That weekend, Grace sorted through bills at the kitchen table while Evan built a Lego spaceship beside her. Money was tight again and she felt the familiar knot in her chest. Everything okay? He asked without looking up. She forced a smile. Always. Evan placed a tiny astronaut on the ship. You don't have to pretend, he said softly. I know when you're worried. Grace sighed. I'm just figuring things out. He nodded. We always do. The simplicity of his faith made her eyes sting. She reached over and ruffled his hair. You're too wise for 10. He smirked. 11 next month. One rainy evening, while Grace reheated leftover pasta, Evan approached her hesitantly. Do you ever think Mom will come back? He asked. She froze, spoon midair. I don't know, she answered honestly. But if she does, it won't change how much I care about you. Evan stared at the floor. If she comes back, will you still want me? The question cracked something inside her. She turned to him fully. Evan, you're not here because Lily left. You're here because you matter. And nothing she does can change that. His voice trembled. Okay. Grace pulled him into a tight hug. You're mine too. The next morning the sky was unusually clear, and the sunlight filled the apartment with a gentle warmth. Grace made pancakes, real ones this time, and Evan sat at the counter swinging his legs. These smell better than mine, he admitted. Grace smiled. That's because I didn't Google the instructions. He rolled his eyes. I was experimenting. After breakfast they walked to the park. Evan raced ahead, laughing loudly as he chased his own shadow across the grass. Grace watched him, her heart swelling. This boy who once flinched at every sound was now running freely, unafraid. She whispered, he's becoming himself. Weeks turned into months and life stabilized in ways Grace never thought possible. Evan's school called to tell her he had been placed in advanced classes. When she picked him up that afternoon he climbed into the car with hesitant excitement. They said I'm smart, he murmured. Grace reached over and squeezed his hand. You are smart. Evan stared out the window. Mom used to say I was just difficult. Grace inhaled sharply. She didn't understand you. That's different from being right. He nodded slowly. That evening he taped his test paper to the fridge. Grace stood beside him, smiling proudly. One night, while Grace folded laundry, Evan sat on the floor organizing his pencils into perfect rows. Do you ever miss her? He asked quietly. Grace paused. Your mom. He nodded. Sometimes, she admitted. I miss the version of her I hoped she could be. Evan whispered, I miss the version I never met. Grace sat beside him. It's okay to feel that way. He leaned against her shoulder. Do you think she'll ever be different? Grace hesitated. I think people change when they truly want to. But we can't wait for that change to happen. We build our life now. Evan nodded sadly but understood. Then came the day everything shifted again. Late one rainy afternoon, a knock sounded at the door. Firm, urgent, too familiar. Grace froze, dread tightening her chest. When she opened the door, Lily stood there soaked from the rain, mascara streaked down her cheeks, a suitcase at her feet. I came to see my son, she said softly. Evan looked down from the staircase, taller now, shoulders squared with quiet confidence. Hi, Lily whispered, stepping forward. Evan remained still. Grace waited, letting him choose what happened next. His voice was steady. You're not a guest here. You're a stranger. Lily flinched. Lily swallowed hard, eyes filling with panic. Evan, please. I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother. Evan shook his head slowly. You had a choice. You left. You didn't look back. She reached for him, but he stepped away. I just want to fix things, she said, voice trembling. Evan lifted his chin. She saved me from you. Lily staggered as if the words had hit her physically. She grabbed her suitcase, backing toward the door. I thought, maybe I could try again, she whispered. Evan stayed silent. Lily stepped into the rain and disappeared down the walkway without another word. The next morning, sunlight poured gently across the kitchen, warming the tiles where Evan sat sipping tea. Grace placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. Not Monday eggs, he joked softly. She nudged him with a smile. The good kind. They ate quietly, but the silence felt peaceful, not heavy. After a while Grace said, she might try again one day. Evan didn't look up. Maybe. But I'm not carrying her choices anymore. Grace studied him, strong, calm, older somehow. You're sure? He nodded. I already made my choice, Grace. This is my home. Her eyes stung with quiet gratitude. Life moved forward gently after that night. Evan returned to school with renewed focus, and Grace settled into a steadier rhythm at work. Evenings were filled with laughter, burnt toast experiments, and long conversations that stretched into comforting routines. One Saturday, while watching a movie, Evan fell asleep with one leg dangling off the couch just like he used to when he was small. Grace didn't wake him. She simply covered him with a blanket and whispered, "You're safe." In that moment she understood something clearly. Lily had become a ghost in their story, and ghosts could not haunt a home filled with love. Years passed and Evan grew into the young man Grace always believed he could be. When he returned home one holiday with a bright-eyed girlfriend named Nina, Grace felt a nervous flutter she hadn't expected. Over dinner, Nina listened kindly, laughed easily, and held Evan's hand with genuine affection. At one point, Evan raised his glass. "I wanted her to meet you here," he said quietly. "This place is where everything started." Nina smiled at Grace and said, "He talks about you all the time." Grace tried to blink away her tears as Evan added, "She's the one who raised me." Time carried them all the way to the day Grace never imagined, Evan's wedding. The chapel was small, sunlit, filled with fresh flowers and gentle music. Grace stood near the front in a soft blue dress, her hands trembling with pride. Evan, tall and confident, adjusted his tie and whispered, "Don't cry yet." During the reception, he tapped his glass for silence. "There's someone I need to thank," he announced, turning toward Grace. "To the woman who gave me a home, a future, and a heart. I love you." Applause filled the room as Grace covered her mouth, overwhelmed with joy. After the wedding, as the evening sun softened over the courtyard, Grace stood alone for a moment, breathing in the warm air. Evan joined her quietly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Better than I ever imagined." He smiled. "Me too." Grace looked toward the horizon and thought about Lily, about second chances, lost chances, and the choices that shape a life. "Do you think she ever meant well?" she asked softly. Evan shrugged. "Maybe. But you're the one who stayed." Grace leaned into him, heart full. This was the ending she never expected, but the one they both deserved.